Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show, and we are broadcasting live across the state of Alaska and around the world, where you can find the audio-only live stream at MichaelDukesShow.com, along with links to the podcast and the social media sites where we simulcast the show every morning on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. So feel free to go on out there and join the chat room and hang out with us there if that's what you would like to do. Today is kind of a busy show. We're going to spend the first hour here talking about the bond issue down on the peninsula. Now, those of you who've been following the show for a long time know that I am highly skeptical of bonds for a variety of reasons. But there is a time and a place for certain ones, but I definitely want to know. And this is one that I've been trying to get caught up on and get up to speed on. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there. Chris Story has done a yeoman's job down in Homer of trying to get this debate out into the public eye before the election next Tuesday, and he had a good piece last week where he had an interview with today's guest, Dr. Paul Raymond, and Ryan. I've just already forgotten Ryan's last name. Ryan, who is one of the leaders there. He is the CEO of Peninsula Healthcare. Let's see, Ryan Smith. He's the CEO of Southern Peninsula Hospital. And it was a really good interview and kind of a roundtable discussion on the pros and cons of it. But I hadn't seen a whole lot of other things. Back in June, there was a couple news stories about it, but it's we're gonna get the rundown on it here, and we'll talk to Dr. Raymond about it and get his take. Then in hour two, we're going to have a short visit with Mead Treadwell, former lieutenant governor, who's coming on board, and we're going to be talking with him about the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. They've got a couple events going on Friday, Saturday, and Monday, and we don't really think about missile defense, so he's going to give us a little bit of a rundown of what's happening there, and maybe we'll come back and talk with him sometime down the road as well. But that's happening this morning in hour two. So, and then of course tomorrow is Firearms Friday, and I can't wait already. I'm already anticipating our favorite day of the year, favorite day of the week, or the year, or whatever. All right, let's get going on here. Let's get things started. Dr. Paul Raymond is in the green room, consuming all of my virtual coffee and all of my virtual donuts. And I asked him to leave me the ones with sprinkles. We'll see if he did that. Dr. Paul Raymond joins us this morning to discuss the bond issue at the Southern Peninsula Hospital. Let's get started. Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on board and joining us today. Doctor, I've been trying to get a little bit up to speed on this issue. I know that there was an article back in June or July that some of the local papers picked up, but I really haven't heard much about this until I stumbled across it on Chris Story's show, where you guys were discussing it. And so, can you give people a brief synopsis of what the bond covers? Because this is a pretty significant bond. This is $38 million plus, and it's only paid for by people who live within the service area of the Southern Peninsula Hospital, which is essentially, I guess, just north of Nikiski, down all the way down to the Homer Peninsula. Can you give us a brief rundown of what this covers?
Yes, but first of all, the South Peninsula service area actually only goes up to Ninilchik. So it's everything south of Ninilchik on the Kenai Peninsula. So it's actually a $38.5 million bond, but with interest, it's really a $52 million bond. And there's $13 million designated to acquire properties next to the hospital, 3 buildings. There is $4 million. Initially, when we read it, we thought it was $10 million for nuclear medicine, but the reality of that $10 million is for $4 million for nuclear medicine, $3 million for expanding the infusion center, $3 million for moving the pharmacy, and then the other $15 million is for upgrades of the generator. And if you had listened to the show with Ryan Smith, he admitted that many of it's left vague, so they can use it for pretty much whatever they want down the line. They didn't want to be too specific. They wouldn't want us taxpayers to actually know exactly what they're spending it on.
So a little bit of a slush fund, is that what you're saying? There's 15 million for a bit of a slush fund?
Yeah, I think, I mean, certainly you have to have repairs and maintenance of equipment, but in my opinion, they currently have $150 million budget, and that's actual revenue. I mean, you should have been funding along the way for depreciation and plant maintenance, and not coming out now and asking the taxpayers to support this massive bond. This bond almost encompasses all other previous bonds put together as far as the number. And you have to also do the math. Is they have $150 million of revenue. There is only 16,500 people. It's $9,000 of revenue for every man, woman, and child in the service area. And it's not enough. They have to have more.
Right. They have to have more. I had to chuckle because Chris had first used a lower number, and Ryan Smith, corrected him and said, no, it's not 125, it's 150 million, and that they make something like just under 4% or 3% profit, which roughly equates to $4 million a year. It's the corporation or the organization that runs the hospital is not a nonprofit. It is a not-for-profit, which is very different, meaning that they can make a profit, they just can't try to, right? We ran into this with like Banner Health in the career. And so
you have to ask, what is enough? When I came here, I lived here, so I came back here out of residency. The budget was $7 million. So it's gone from 7 million, and just 5 years ago, it was their revenue was 85 million. Now we're up to 150 million, and yet their actual margins of what they get to keep has gotten less and less and less. So the July numbers that they put out had them at. Basically, they're going to have about 2 million this year. So it's 1.5%. If I operated like a business like that, I'd probably retire.
Yeah, no, at some point you have to ask the question, if you're an organization that can do these things, why don't you do them? If you're making a profit and that profit should be poured back into the community because it's a not-for-profit and supposed to be a community endorsement, you could just buy the stuff. You could buy the properties and pay them off. If you're making $1 million plus, $2 million, $3 million a year in profit, you could pour that into something like that and have it paid off in 10 years. Why would you continue to come back to the stone of the people at this point and keep squeezing? And I always have a problem with bond issues because they always make it look so palatable. And it's always, it's only $50 per 100,000. It's only $80 per 100,000. It's only $100 per 100,000. Don't you care about the community? Well, yes, but I also care about encumbering my own property with all this stuff and creating more debt. Besides the fact, it's a $38 million bond. What's the ultimate cost going to be? $50 million, $52 million, $55 million? By the time you get it paid off over, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever the bond length becomes on each one of these things, you pay an exorbitant amount of money. And I find that to be problematic. But you're a doctor. You're the one that's been following this more closely than I. Like I said, I'm trying to get caught up and get up to speed. So tell me, as you look at this, what are some of the most glaring, issues that you have with this, and why should people be, up in arms about it? What do you see here that's given us headaches?
Well, let's start with each item. So let's talk about the land acquisition. There's 3 properties. There's 15,000 square foot footprint of the 3 buildings total. One of them was actually my original clinic, or not my original clinic, but the clinic I was in before I built another one, is around 11,000 square feet. So that makes up the biggest portion of it. That building is now 22 years old. They have been leasing it. They put $600,000 into leasehold improvements. The hospital did, not the landlord. One of the properties, they went on about how the building of properties or the building of new facilities is overly expensive, and this is a good deal. But the reality is, they admitted that they plan on tearing it down to make room for parking. So, and then the other building, they talk about, we've been trying to acquire all this land for so long, and this is our first opportunity. The other building was just built 2 years ago, and they've already leased it, and they've moved their administration into that building because it's actually a pretty fancy building, even though it's a small footprint. So that's probably the biggest thing. But they're leasing it or I mean, they're buying this at 13 million is what they've proposed for this. In all fairness, the value of those properties, even if you are very generous, is 4 to 5 million at the best. So they're justifying it by saying, well, we've leased this for 20 years. Well, if I'm a businessman and I want to acquire property, I probably don't sign 20-year leases and then come back and say, oh, we'd like to buy ourselves out of this lease and get the property also. So that's probably the biggest one out there. And so the other part of that is, okay, say the voters approve this. Now, the hospital has those buildings. They have a terrible history of maintaining buildings. Right now, at least if they lease them, the landlord is theoretically the one carrying the maintenance. But the other thing, it takes those off the tax rolls that support the city and push further the amount of taxes that we're going to have to pay to support both the city and the borough. Because if you look at just the tax loss, it's about $600,000 over that period of time, based on the current assessments.
Right.
And so you and I both know those assessments literally went up 40% this year.
Right. So while it only cost $67 per 100,000 based on their 38 million, that doesn't take into account the fact that it's going to pull it off the tax rolls, and you'll have an additional increase on top of it.
Right. And now they're going to be subject to maintenance, and we can get later into their ability to do maintenance later when we talk about a couple other issues. But that's the land part. Do you have any questions further on that part?
Well, no, I mean, I find it astonishing that they've been leasing it, they've been utilizing it, and now all of a sudden they want to buy it. And the fact that they want to buy it, it's such a greater value. Chris talked a little bit about the valuation that they're trying to use to justify this, and he said, as a realtor of 20 years, he'd never heard of a property being transferred under that type of valuation. And so there's, for me, there's a lot of red flags on the play just to begin with on that alone. And that, that's a little frustrating. So that's just the land component, which is the biggest part, 13 million of this $38+ million bond. So what are the other things that are covered? Actually, hold on a second, Dr. Paul. I just looked at the clock and realized I was so absorbed in what you're saying that I'm bumping up against the break. So I have to go here. We're going to continue with Dr. Paul Raymond here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll return right after this.
Can you hear me doing this?
Yeah, hold on.
I have a couple more comments on the land.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Dr. Paul Raymond is our guest. Yeah, you're live. Everybody can hear you when you talk. So as we go, no problem. We're in the.
I tell people that during that debate, I'm not a politician, so I kind of spoke like Joe Biden, but I felt that I was competing with Obama.
Possibly, yeah, the smooth talker versus the stutterer. But I think you're making some valid points. I mean, you've been. I want to I don't want to get too far afield here, Doctor, because I hate to repeat myself for folks on the podcast. They hear all the in-between commercial break stuff and everything. So folks who are listening, I hate to repeat myself, but I do want to touch on a couple things as we get closer to it. This idea that somehow this is going to make the hospital system cheaper, faster, stronger, better, and everything else. But even Paul Smith or even Ryan Smith said, no, it's really not going to affect the actual cost of what's going on, which is a little troubling. And I think we'll come back to that here in just a moment. Tell us a little bit about your background, since we're in the break and we got a minute here. You said you were from Homer. You came back after your residency. Just give us a little bit of background here so people have a little better idea of what your skin in the game is here.
Well, I grew up actually in Castilla, and I graduated from Kenai High when there weren't all the other high schools up there. And then I went and did my undergraduate in Washington and actually got my medical degree at University of Washington, did my residency in Michigan. And then I came back after residency to Homer in 1987 and basically been in private practice since that time. I am the lone holdout as far as primary care. There's OBGYN that is left the hospital and is open at private. But for the most part, it is a monopoly down here. The hospital owns everything. They currently have 32 properties. And even if you listen to Ryan, when he talks about the big picture of buying these properties, they want to have all the properties. And the reality is they want to have a structure like they have in Central Peninsula Hospital, a big, huge office building. He even mentioned that during that debate. Well, to do that, there's at least 3 private homes that would have to be sold. There's another semi-retired surgeon that has an office still. And then there's myself, and I have 4 buildings and another 1.2 acre property in the way of their growth. So, I mean, if you do the math, if this is 13 million, in all fairness, they're going to be looking at 50 million to buy me out. And then, and all this other, it's a ridiculous plan. It's a flat world. If they want to do their physical therapy and everything else off site, which they've already committed to, then expand that way. But to spend this type of money of the taxpayers is really absurd.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things. You don't know anything about my history, but when I was in Fairbanks, we fought a tremendous battle in Fairbanks there over the certificate of need. There was a full monopoly in Fairbanks going on but for imaging and for many other things. And for several years there, we fought a big battle. I had a surgeon that I was working with up there trying to get the information out to make people understand how bad those monopolies are for people. Initially, they were certificates of need were supposed to be to protect, people and everything else. And all they did was stifle competition. We were eventually successful in that. And they opened up a private surgery center in Fairbanks, and it dropped the cost. When my wife had her knee surgery, it was 1/3 of what it would have cost at Fairbanks Memorial to have it done by this private surgeon who was the best in the city. He was the best in the city for that surgery anyway. And he left the hospital for that reason. It's one of the things. I mean, healthcare is one of the largest cost drivers for people in their lives these days. And it's very frustrating to see these kind of consolidation efforts going on when I think what we need more options. And that's kind of troubling to me. The ding means we're returning back to the radio. So let's go back to it and we'll continue on. Dr. Paul Raymond is our guest. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share. And this, I think, is an important show to share, especially if you're down in the service area of SPH. Please share it out with your friends and relatives and folks. Let's get to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Let's do it.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yeah, I'm a pain in the something or other, that's for sure. All right, I know everybody's going to hate me after today. We're talking about the bond issue coming up on Tuesday's ballot down on the peninsula, specifically affecting people from Ninilchik downward, and that is on the Southern Peninsula Hospital bond. Dr. Paul Raymond is our guest, and we're discussing this as we go through here, getting a little bit more information. We just talked about the properties. Let's break down some of the other elements of this, Dr. Raymond. Where what else is covered here? I know they've got infusion center, nuclear medicine. There's a few other things. Give us the rundown there.
Well, let's do the nuclear medicine next. That's they've designated $4 million for nuclear medicine. It's interesting that if you listen to the borough mayor was promoting this, and Chris Story had him on his show, and he used the example that a friend of his needed dialysis and they didn't have dialysis in Soldotna, and she chose to just go ahead and die rather than have to go to Anchorage for dialysis. And so, he was touting that, we were very fortunate in Soldotna to have dialysis now. And Chris said, but this bond isn't getting dialysis to Homer. And he says, well, no, we wouldn't, that's a repetition of services. So using his same argument, they have nuclear medicine in Soldotna. They've had it for 20 years, but they only do about 30 to 40 patients per month. And so Ryan Smith has said that this area would support 20 patients a month. If you know much about nuclear medicine, some of the scans that we've used for the last 30 years are no longer the standard of care. The main scans used in Soldotna are bone scans by the urologist for prostate cancer. If you go to Anchorage or any other institution these days, the standard of care for staging prostate cancer is prostate membrane specific antigen PET scans. We can't afford a PET scanner. There's no intent of getting a PET scanner here. But my point is this is no longer the standard of care anyway for that. And the other scan that we use the most is for evaluating coronary artery disease. And so it's a cardiolite stress test. That, again, is being replaced by coronary artery CT angiograms. You can make the argument that 20 years ago, maybe we should have put nuclear medicine in. I don't think it would have been financially feasible. But now we're trying to put a limited type of diagnostic procedure in Homer that already is 60 miles or 80 miles up the road. And we would be stealing from them. So it would actually make that program up there less viable also.
So, okay. So, I mean, I see it. So, okay. But this, again, utilizing this idea that, again, this had nothing to do with dialysis. So that argument's out the window. We're utilizing an old system of an old diagnostic technique that's not even used anymore. And they want to justify that. I mean, I'm confused, doctor. I'm confused. Why would they continue to say that this is the reason and this is the good idea? This is starting to feel a lot like smoke and mirrors, quite honestly.
Well, and when you tried to pin him down on the costs of the ongoing costs of having nuclear medicine, the cost of the isotopes, the cost of techs, the cost of maintenance of equipment, his answer was refer to the certificate of need. We put that all in the certificate of need. It's transparent, but he himself had no idea of the concept of costs. And if you listen to the show, a 5-minute call to Soldotna and talking to their nuclear medicine manager, he actually volunteered that there's significant cost to it. But they don't want anybody to actually know that part of the information.
So nuclear medicine was the next thing. And then the infusion center, and infusions are utilized for various types of medications. Give us the rundown of what that means when they talk about infusions.
I don't know exactly how I think $3 million to expand their infusion center. I'd probably accept that. Infusion center is an important part. That it allows people to get their chemotherapy here. It allows iron infusions. People that have rheumatoid arthritis, the infusions of the biological drugs. I think that's a justifiable part. But again, it's $3 million. You shouldn't have to bond this. You should be able to fund this out of your operating revenue. So if we move on to the next one, pharmacy, they were not in compliance with their inspections. They do have to do upgrades and moving the pharmacy. Again, $3 million. That should come out of operations. It doesn't need to be funded by us.
Yeah, because again, a reminder that they're still making a profit of $2 million a year, $3 million a year, depending on what their revenue is. Right. So it could be something that could be paid off in just a few years.
So, we brought up a 60-year-old bank building that they leased for 12 years. And then they bought for $975,000. They had already replaced the roof on that while they leased it. But then immediately upon buying it, they had to fund another $80,000 to replace the roof. Now they're $999,475 to convert it into a daycare. And they're literally going to get in the daycare business because they said, well, there's need for daycare for their employees. And that's fine. They could have, asked the community, we need more daycare, et cetera, et cetera. But they literally are building this. And my understanding from people at the hospital is that it is going to be open for public, not just for employees. And they're going to have 5 employees there. And they're going to charge like $1,700 a month. So they literally are getting into the daycare business. They don't have the funds to even maintain their own building, but now we're going to take a 60-year-old trash building and make a daycare business. So, then you look at where those funds came from, and that's the real interesting part, because when they asked the borough to buy that building, that money came out of the plant reconstruction or maintenance, the plant maintenance and expansion fund. So they're literally taking out of the same funds that are supposed to help with their infrastructure and generator. They took that funds out of there.
Right.
But it's more complex than that, because there was an education department there that they had to spend $260,000 moving out of. In addition, they spent almost $1 million. It's $970,000 or so to move the OBGYN women's clinic into the hospital. They currently rent 2 other structures, and that move was funded by the plant replacement fund. So,
Okay.
And now they're asking for the other $15 million to fix the plant replacement. But in reality, in July, when I looked at their own numbers, they had almost $7 million in that account in cash still. So despite them draining it off $1 million at a time, they still had around $7 million.
Right.
So my point is, this is not our job as the public to burden ourselves more for their financial mishaps.
So, and I guess one of the things we should have gone over earlier is the structure of how this is, because the borough is involved, right? The borough owns basically the equipment, the utilities, the infrastructure. They own that, and then they have hired a foundation or created an organization to run it, a not-for-profit organization. But this is essentially, the borough is the one behind. This is why Mayor Machicki has been so hot on this, is because the borough is behind this all the way around, right?
Absolutely. The borough owns both Central Peninsula Hospital and South Peninsula Hospital. And if you're from Fairbanks, you know that when the foundation took over Fairbanks, it's become a disaster. So it's a very similar picture here. So the borough runs it. They have a 401c with an appointed, and when I say appointed, self-appointed. So you can't run for election to be on the operating board. Literally, they pick members of the community that are like-minded. So if you're somebody like you or me that really says, hey, how do we spend our money? It's highly unlikely you're going to end up on that board because it's self-appointed.
Right. Yeah.
There is a, quote, service area board that's supposed to manage the tax money, it's an advisory board. But, my wife was on there for a short period of time. And when she was on there, they would bring the budget. They'd ask for approval of the budget, but they never gave anybody on the service area board any time to review the budget. There was they didn't have time for a work group or anything. And literally they'd say on the last one that she attended, they said, this has to pass tonight because the Borough Assembly is going to approve it tomorrow. Everything is pushed through this, and they're all volunteers. It's
rubber stamp.
And literally in 25 years, the service area board has never said no to anything. It's literally a rubber stamp board. But I'll go further. Our great elected Borough Assembly also has pretty much rubber stamped anything they've asked. So
Well, it's frustrating, and the fact that they're taking monies from funds, like you said, the power plant replacement fund and things like that, to do other things, just shows that, to me, that's the indication of an organization that can't be trusted with where the money's supposed to go. One of my biggest pet peeves in the world, and people who's listened to the show know this, is the idea of deferred maintenance. We had a similar thing happen on the Fairbanks Borough Assembly, where, I mean, Fairbanks had $250 million. That's billion with a B, $250 million in deferred maintenance on public facilities in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. And why was that? It was because they kept taking money out of funds that were supposed to pay for stuff to repair things and keep and upkeep them, and they were utilizing them for other things. And that's always been a problem with this kind of stuff. And I guess the hospital has a history of this as well. I'm told. You know better than me. What tell me, are they being judicious with the monies that they're supposed to upkeep the buildings and the infrastructure with?
Absolutely not. All you have to do is look. They have a couple of houses that they purchased, way back in the early 90s. For several years, the one house literally had, crime tape with a ladder for the escape from the second story, and they finally got rid of that. But they haven't been painted or any maintenance done on them in literally the last 20 years. The bank building I already discussed that they currently own, they are, I call them slumlords. And that's why they shouldn't buy these properties, because they're going to become slums too. That's their history. They literally don't maintain anything. And as you're absolutely right. And it's funny because, when they fired Joe Wooden, who was a previous CEO, I happened to be out on the East Coast, and I said, I think I'm going to call Joe Wooden and have lunch with him. So I went to Stowe, Vermont, and he said exactly what you said. He says, the books are cooked. He says they literally never fund depreciation and put that in the whole picture. So there you go.
Which is a recipe for future disaster. As I said, when they discovered, and somebody did a deep dive after I left Fairbanks, it was actually a borough mayor who he and I had both been assembly members and been at loggerheads over several things. And he and I actually had a conversation, and he apologized to me and said, "You were right," because I was railing against this deferred maintenance problem. And he said, "I've discovered that it's $280 million in deferred maintenance." And I'm like, wow, for a community of 100,000 people, you got $250 million. He goes like, yeah. So, I mean, this is a huge problem, and it's not unique to any one area. It is human nature to say, well, I'll just take that money and use it for my pet project instead of paying for the roofs, the lights, the upgrades, the power, whatever that they're supposed to do.
And on their own financial statements last month, they actually had that, their target is 8-year on their, replacement or whatever. They're at 14.5, I think. So, they've pushed the cart down the road.
Yeah. There's only so much road you can kick that can down before you run out of run, and there's the ravine, at the other end. Dr. Paul Raymond is our guest. We're up against the break here. We're going to come back with one final segment. And to me, one of the most important questions. This is the question I'm going to ask Dr. Paul when we get back, because to me, this is one of the most telling things. If we do all this, does it help us by giving us cheaper medicine, cheaper healthcare, which of course is the main goal, right? That's what people are looking for. We'll have Dr. Paul answer that question on the other side. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Dr. Paul Raymond is our guest, and we're going through this stuff. And again, we'll change gears a little bit here during the commercial break so we don't repeat ourselves, and Dr. Paul can answer my big question when we come back. But, Dr. Paul, this is the thing that has just killed me so much over the years. And I remember my ultimate frustration when we were fighting about this in Fairbanks is that We've seen this in many, many smaller communities. Now, if you live in the States and you can drive 100 miles to a different hospital system, it's one thing. But here in Alaska, it's a captive system, right? I mean, there is no, from Fairbanks, you got to drive 400 miles to get anywhere. From Homer, you can go to Kenai, but maybe you got to go all the way to Anchorage. So it's another 260 miles or whatever to go all the way up there and do the thing. And this lack of competition, this consolidation where hospital systems have come in and bought up single providers and things like that, that has been supremely detrimental. I mean, Chris was on the program on Tuesday, and he actually had an extra segment where he talked a little bit about this. And he said that there was, I don't know if it was you or another doctor that sold their scanner to the hospital. He'd been an independent imaging thing, and they sold the x-ray. And he said the day after that he sold his x-ray machine to the hospital, the x-rays in town doubled in price. That just shows you that, while consolidation brings some efficiencies, it doesn't do anything good for your pocketbook.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can look at the Kenai had a surgery center, an independent surgery center. I had my colonoscopy. My wife actually had her colonoscopy the day before they closed. And basically the hospital came in and hired the main doctors that had the biggest percentages of that to get the votes. And then $9.5 million later, they bought it. Now, understanding they didn't buy a building, they didn't buy anything but the name, and I'm going to be generous when I say maybe $500,000 worth of underlying equipment. But, the price of colonoscopy there was $1,500. Cost at Central Peninsula Hospital is north of 8, 9, 10,000. So you're absolutely right. This is the game that they play. They literally go in, they've done it to me. They've taken providers out of my office by offering them literally $100,000 more than I could pay them. And I will tell you that I was subsidizing those providers as it was, because they weren't generating even what I was paying them. And they've done it to Saldovi Village Tribal Clinic. They've gone in and scarfed up their doctors. They want the monopoly. And all you have to do is look at that revenue. Don't be, I really believe that the public is totally naive and totally, I'd like to say they have more than a 6th grade education, but all you have to do is look, when you've gone to 150 million and that type of revenue, this is not about patient care. This is about how much money we can generate.
Well, when you say 5 years ago, the revenue was 85 million and today it's 150, hey, that's the kind of stock market I'd like to play, right? Come on, that's that's where I want to invest my money. How do we do that? And go ahead.
And my wife, she had to have a CT of the abdomen and pelvis with and without contrast, and she did it here locally. We had decent insurance. We had Blue Cross. So, you have a 20% copay. The 20% copay was twice the amount that I could get the same thing paying cash at diagnostic imaging in Anchorage. Just the 20% copay.
Just the 20% copay.
Why have insurance if literally we're going to end up paying twice as much for a service? I'm the guy that doesn't respond to being bought out. And my line is, we're all prostitutes, but eventually there's not a price that's high enough that we sell ourselves.
Well, there's a principle in there somewhere. Sandy just said $12,400 for a colonoscopy at Central Peninsula, not including the doc or the anesthesiologist.
There you go. So it's literally tenfold more.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is insane. And it's a Ponzi scheme. There's no way that that's sustainable. So I always like the health fair as the example I use. So the Rotary Club down here for literally 40 years has done what's called a health fair. And they use that money to fund the Rotary Club, but also it's community service. And it was always supposed to be, in the day, you could literally for $6 get all the blood tests. But when the hospital took it over, now they actually use it as a moneymaker. So their healthcare labs are twice the cost of if people come into my office and get the labs and pay cash.
Okay. All right. I got to stop you. I got to stop you right there because I'm going to lose my mind, but we're also going to rejoin the radio. So here we go. Getting back to it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Dr. Paul Raymond, our guest. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That guy is so mean. I don't know why. I don't know why he's so bitter about things. Maybe because he was forced to vote on this Peninsula Hospital thing. That's why. Dr. Paul Raymond is our guest. The question that I was asking and talking with Dr. Paul about before we went to break was, okay, so let's just say all things being equal, everything else about this bond made sense, yada, yada, yada. The question is, and the biggest question, because healthcare costs are one of the biggest drivers for people in their lives, is, okay, so we do all this. Does it reduce the costs of our healthcare? Does it make it better for us, Dr. Paul?
No, absolutely not. And I have to ask you a question. So the stuff we talked about, has the audience already heard that, or can we talk about that now?
No, we can hit that again because we were just during the break. I tried to anyway. I got sidetracked and I was so upset about it because of the cost of these things is just
basically when you create a monopoly, it never is good for the consumer. So examples we talked about is, myself and my wife got our colonoscopies at the Kenai Surgery Center. Well, the hospital came in and basically hired the main physicians that owned that in order to get control of it, and they end up buying that surgery center for $9.5 million. The reality is they didn't get a building. They got the license and they got maybe $500,000 of underlying equipment. But the result was, instead of a colonoscopy being $1,500, as one of your staff members said, now just the hospital costs alone, it's over $12,000 at Central Peninsula, and that does not include the pathology and the physician fee, if I remember right. Similarly, my wife this last year had a CT scan of her abdomen and pelvis with and without contrast locally at South Peninsula Hospital. We had Blue Cross insurance. Her 20% copay was over twice the amount that she could have received that same test at Diagnostic Imaging in Anchorage. So your answer is no, these are absurd costs. And I go on to, we talked about the health fair. So there's a health fair down here that the Rotary Club has used as a fundraiser for literally 40 years. In the early 90s, they merged with South Peninsula Hospital to help sponsor it. And initially that was fine. And you could get all your blood tests for literally $6 to $10 back then. Now the hospital uses that charity event, or that's meant to benefit the community, as a moneymaker. So they actually bragged at a service area board meeting that my wife attended about how much money they made. And the truth is, they're, quote, health fair labs that the community thinks they're getting a huge discount on are literally twice as much as if they came in and just paid for the labs at my office.
Right. So let me paint the picture here. So this is a community fair that is highlighted as, oh, come in and get your health, get your labs done, get your blood work, do all this stuff. This is the time to get it done for the best price possible. And we're here to benefit the community. Yet I'm going to pay twice what I would have if I just walked into the thing and gotten the labs done at the hospital.
Well, if you got them done in my office.
Done in Dr. Raymond's office, right, rather than the hospital. All right, my bad.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. No, I mean, this, anytime you do things where you're spending money like our government has recently, the answer is there's inflation, right? So, but this is the extremes of that. This is inflation put on steroids. I mean, the cost of medical care for anybody that's underinsured or self-pay is exorbitant here, and there's no way that they can afford this. And if you look, I mean, they say, oh, the demographics are only changing. Absolutely. When I came here, we had about 220 babies a year. We had no OBGYN. We were family docs. We all delivered the babies. Now the hospital has 3 OBGYNs, and they have 110 babies a year, and we have a Medicare population. So everybody with Medicare says, oh, it's okay. It's Medicare pays for this. No, it's still our tax dollars.
Yeah, there's still a cost associated with that. There's no such thing. I hate to break it to people. There's no such thing as free money. That money comes from somewhere, and generally speaking, it comes out of the pockets of Americans. So yeah, it's somebody's paying for that in the long run. The overall push for this, obviously, somebody said, and I don't know like I said, I'm still trying to get up to speed 100% on this, but I'm leery of any bond issue to begin with. But part of the push, they say here, is that the borough government is looking to consolidate more of their power around the healthcare stuff. Is that something that you see, or is that, what's your take on that?
I have no idea on that. All I know is they lease or own 32 properties in a town of 4,000 people. And they're expanding, like I say, exponentially, not linearly. So I don't know what the end goal is, and they can't answer that. What is the end goal? They just hired a plastic surgeon. So why would you hire a plastic surgeon, which usually requires a population of at least 80,000 people to support, where a service area is 17,000 or 16,500 or in that area. So I asked him, actually, it wasn't on the air, unfortunately. I said, why would you hire a plastic surgeon? He said, well, he said he was coming here to live here anyway. Okay, why would you want to take on that? And his answer, and I'm serious, Ryan Smith's answer was, plastic surgeons often want a surgery center, so we couldn't afford to let that happen.
So this was a preemptive strike to prevent this surgeon from building his own surgery center and becoming competition.
Absolutely. Yes.
Wow.
And, this is a critical care, critical access hospital, which means you can't have more than 25 inpatient beds, but critical access. I don't think you can look anywhere in the nation at a, quote, critical access hospital and say, oh, plastic surgery, that fits into critical access. We got to have that.
I mean, isn't that elective? Isn't that elective surgery? Not necessary.
Yeah, and here's the other eye opener. There's no way that most plastic surgery is out of pocket. Insurance companies aren't going to pay it. If you want breast augmentation, butt lifts, whatever it is, that's out of pocket. There's no way that somebody's going to have that done, because the hospital is never going to get the prices low enough that they can compete on that. Right. So it's just there's a lot of errors in thinking and judgment of the people making these decisions.
Dr. Paul Raymond has been our guest. We're down to the last couple minutes here, Paul. So give us your final thoughts here, your final plea to the public for people who are listening, who may have been undecided or who may have just been going to rubber stamp this because, oh yeah, I want cheaper healthcare. Because even the mayor, in one of the articles, said that. Oh, he said, this brings the cost down to those that are receiving the services, says Mayor Machicki. When we just found out that it's not the truth.
No, and obviously that's not the truth. So the biggest thing I'd say is the borough has done this over the years. They have these special elections that don't coincide with the national elections or the state elections. So you have to vote by October 1st. There's nothing else on the ballot except this and the service area board and borough assembly, and that guy's running unopposed. But they depend on low voter turnout. Literally 7 out of 10 people I talk to are against this. But I predict this will pass because of voter apathy. So I'm begging anybody that thinks this isn't important, go down and vote early. Go down to City Hall today and vote, because October 1st, you may be too busy to vote and too lazy to vote. So I'm begging everybody, go out and vote. Yes or no, go out and vote. But certainly I oppose this.
I guess my final question to you is, like you said, this is a self-licking ice cream cone. This is non-sustainable. It's a doom loop, right? Eventually, it will just be so costly. Do you think this will inspire other doctors to want to come to places like Homer and other places and start their own facilities because, because it is such, they can make money at a fraction of the cost?
No, I don't think so. The problem is the hospital is too aggressive. They have 60 physicians. Or 60 providers now. When I was here, there was 5, right? When I came here. So, I mean, they literally, like this plastic surgeon, anybody that comes to town, they are going to bait them with so much money. Because if you look at these salaries,
right,
there's so much money that it's going to be hard for somebody to, unless they have real will to remain in.
Dr. Paul Raymond's our guest. We're out of time for this hour. Folks, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. See you in hour 2.
Thank you very much.
Well, doctor, thank you so much. Are you, do they allow you to practice at the hospital? Do you have to, well,
here's that discussion. You ready? So,
yeah.
So we're off the air, right?
Yes, it's just you, me, and 70 of our closest friends on the internet. So go ahead.
Perfect. Well, basically, anybody in private practice that has privileges up there, they literally, it becomes a hostile work environment. So I can go through and list at least 10 providers that had privileges that said, whoa, I got to get out of here because something bad's going to happen. Because literally they start doing incident reports or anything if you're not a hospital employee. So, back in 2016, I'd said, I can't do this politics. I got to get out of here. So I dropped my privileges there, but I can literally list another 10 providers that have done the same thing. Good providers, local providers, not bad physicians. So, I always tell the one story is I once had a physician that was retiring from up there in Anchorage that just wanted to come down. So I had him working in my office a few days a week. And they put him in doing call at the emergency room. I got a call from the hospital, the ER director at that time said, this guy's incompetent. You can't have him up here. I said, I don't have him up here. You have him up there. So when he was no longer working for me, they hired him for another 3 years. So,
Great. Oh, great. Yeah. He's that incompetent. We hired him for another 3 years.
Yeah. And in defense of him, he wasn't incompetent. It's just, he was working for me. That was the problem.
Yeah. And this is exactly the same scenario that I saw up north with this kind of stuff, where they were doing everything and anything they could to try and squash any kind of competition to their monopoly, because that's what they like. I mean, and it's a shame because, again, the healthcare costs. I mean, just our personal experience with my wife, because I had fought for that surgery center to be open, and about a year and a half after it opened, my wife had to have that knee surgery, and the costs were less than half of what Fairbanks Memorial would have charged for the same surgery. And the doctor was the best doctor in town to get it done. And he wasn't working at the hospital anymore because he told them to go pound sand.
Well, I can tell you that in my previous office, which I had sold my practice a little bit, but on a day I was seeing patients, Dorotha Ferraro, who was the PR person there, literally had a sign attached to the outside of my door that said, this clinic is no longer going to exist. Come across the street, literally while I was seeing patients.
What, she put a sign on your clinic that said this is wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I have a picture of it, by the way.
Oh my God. It's astonishing. But we're just, and you're right. I think voter apathy, low voter information, will all play into this. And I think it's got a very good thing of passing because, I mean, who doesn't want to have better health care? Who doesn't want to? And the mayor has said it will cost us less. And, all these things, who doesn't want those things? So sure, it more than likely will pass unless we get this information out.
Well, and I'll tell you, if you listen to him on the radio show, he was talking about when I said, quality versus quantity. You know, I mean, you want good quality healthcare, not quantity of healthcare. And he said, we have great quality. We had 100% on our sepsis. Well, we have 6 sepsis patients a year, so I guess. But if you really look at the numbers, and then he talked about his satisfaction and everything, patient satisfaction for outpatient services at their clinics was the 14th percentile on their last report. So I don't know what school he goes to, but 14th percentile is not where I want to be.
Yeah, no, exactly not. And again, this just means that you drive to Anchorage or you fly to Seattle or you go somewhere else because, I mean, let's face it, if I had to have a procedure done and it was half the price, and even including my hotel stay and my trip and my gas and my time to drive to Anchorage or to fly to Seattle, you guarantee you that I'm going to be doing that rather than sticking around town.
Well, the irony of that is the city of Homer Insurance, their plan will fly you to Seattle to get your knee replacement rather than use their local service.
That's enough said right there. Enough said. All right. Well, Dr. Paul Raymond, thank you so much for coming on board. I really appreciate your time and your insight into this because, again, I could find very little on the internet about this, very little that wasn't just from the hospital or from those news stories back in June or July. And that's frustrating. There is no opposing side, really. You're the only voice that I was able to discover that was talking about this. And I appreciate that. And like I said, coming from my background, I trust you a lot more than I trust the hospitals in that regard.
They did say it was transparent, but what you didn't understand, what they meant by transparent is you see right through it and you don't find anything.
Exactly. It's an empty bowl on the other end. Well, that is transparent. So, all right. Well, Dr. Paul Raymond, thank you so much for coming on board. I appreciate it. Appreciate you. All right. You folks down in Homer, Anchor Point, and Nilchik, you guys better. I mean, what the actual? This is so frustrating because again, this is exactly what the fight was about in Fairbanks. I mean, just like down to the rivets. I mean, although here I got a little bit more insight into the hospital coming in and essentially buying the competition up. I mean, hiring a plastic surgeon and paying him an annual salary to do what? Just so that he doesn't build a surgery center that competes with you? I mean, how is that even competition? If it's elective surgery, that's not even, I mean, I don't even understand. I don't even understand. All right. Well, I see that Mead Treadwell has joined us in the green room, and we're getting ready to jump in on this. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance and some of their big events that are coming up here this weekend. So we'll get that done, and we'll return in just a moment. Let's go to it. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show. Streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, and it's the Thursday edition of the show. We just finished up with Dr. Paul Raymond from down in Homer talking about that bond issue on the ballot only for people in the Southern Peninsula Hospital service area. So you folks down there, if you are against this, you need to go educate all your neighbors over the next 3 or 4 days. All right. You've got to go out there and get it done. It's just insanity. If you missed it, go back and listen to it on the podcast or watch it on the replay on Facebook or YouTube. You can find those links at michaeldukeshow.com if you want to find out there. But hour 2, we're now talking about missile defense. And former Lieutenant Governor Mead Treadwell is going to join us here and talk about it with us. The Missile Defense Alliance is going to, Advocacy Alliance, rather, is putting on some big events. And, of course, missile defense is a big part of our protection, although we don't really talk about it much anymore, it seems like. So he's going to come on board and join us right now to discuss. Former Lieutenant Governor Mead Treadwell joins us this morning. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm well, Mike. How are you?
No complaints. No complaints. Every day is a good day above ground. So, Mead, I know you've been hot and heavy on missile defense for a long time. You've done a lot of work, have a lot of background in it. But the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, tell us a little bit about that and what's going on, and give us a little bit of background here about what we're talking about.
Sure, Mike. I'm here to tell you about 3 events happening in Alaska this week. Tomorrow at the Denina Center from 10 to 1, the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance is going to have a symposium. It's free, open to the public. They do like people to register ahead of time. That will have leaders from the Missile Defense Agency as well as Northcom talking about the emerging threats, missile threats to Alaska that are coming from both the Pacific as well as the Middle East. On Saturday night, the Advocacy Alliance will have an awards dinner, as they've had in every year really for the last 20, where Missile Defenders of the Year in Alaska, whether it's National Guard troops at Fort Greely, whether it's Air Force or Space Force folks at Elmendorf or J-Bear or Clear or out in Shemya, will be awarded for their work in helping to defend the homeland. And then on Monday is the 20th anniversary of the deployment of missile defense in Alaska. And I've got a little bit of a story to tell you about that. And that's going to be at Fort Greely. And anybody who wants to go attend that event also needs to RSVP at Missile Defense Advocacy.org. And in fact, for any one of those 3 events, that's the website or that's the email to do. It's RSVP at missiledefenseadvocacy.org. But anyway, it's good to see you. And as you know, this is a huge project that was built in Alaska over the last 20 years. It's the only major ballistic missile defense system in the country. There are a few silos at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. But it's also kind of a celebration of 25, 30 years of Alaskans working together to make sure that our state and Hawaii were defended, because up until the end of the Clinton administration, the national plan was to do it in North Dakota, where you could not have, under the laws of physics, defended Alaska and Hawaii. So it's kind of fun to see this past its 20-year mark.
Right. And let's talk about that, because Alaska is geographically, Alaska is in a unique position. I saw a picture the other day that was talking about air travel and cargo, and it was a picture top down of the Earth, with Anchorage at the center. And it basically showed how Anchorage, one of the reasons why Anchorage is the busiest cargo hubs in the world, is because it is the shortest destination to most of Europe and Asia and all these other places. And so Alaska has a geographic advantage in that we can reach other parts of the world, or in this case, protect us from other parts of the world, because it is the shortest destination and they have to travel over us to get to the rest of the United States. That was the big push. And like you said, they weren't even considering Alaska at one point. It was somewhere else. So tell us a little bit about that fight.
Well, the first major arms control treaty that was ever signed was 1972. It was negotiated by Henry Kissinger. It was signed by Nixon. And it basically said, we're not going to get into an anti-missile arms race with the Soviets. And I can understand the theory. The theory was that if each side holds the other population hostage, we won't have a nuclear war. Ronald Reagan thought that was kind of crazy. He said, why are you holding whole populations hostage when you might be able to shoot missiles down coming at your country. So they negotiated some changes, and actually there was an agreement that you could defend your nation's capital as well as have a missile defense site at one site that was selected as North Dakota. There was a big push after Reagan's so-called Star Wars speeches to get this done. And it was opposed by the left. Teddy Kennedy, I think, named it Star Wars. And the Clinton administration did an intelligence estimate that said there's no real missile threat to the United States except from Russia and China. And there was an asterisk. And the asterisk said it's no real threat to the lower 48, but Iran is coming along. North Korea is coming along. Iraq was developing some longer range rockets at that time. And the Alaska legislatures passed a resolution that said, what are we, chopped liver? And called for a new intelligence estimate. Ted Stevens used that to get the Rumsfeld Commission started that said, no, we could be attacked without warning. And by the end of the Clinton administration, they were in the process of talking to the Russians about renegotiating the AVM treaty. The U.S. pulled out after 9/11, December of 2001, in the Bush administration, and we went ahead and built missile defense at Fort Greely. So that's what's happened with the ballistic missile defense. Now what's happening, and I think you've probably talked about this, you know, when one of those Russian Bear bombers show up in our ADIZ, our Air Defense Identification Zone, they're not trying to, they're not practicing to fight their way through past our radars and our fighter jets to come directly drop bombs someplace in North America. They can unleash literally dozens, if not hundreds, of cruise missiles. And so there's an upgrade needed to missile defense on the cruise missile threat. You're seeing that with the upgrade of our dew-line radars around the coast. There's also, Vladimir Putin talks all the time about having hypersonic glide vehicles that are harder to shoot down because they can change direction. And so we're going to hear about that and the defenses for that. And then, of course, we've seen very sadly in the conflicts now happening in Europe and the Middle East, drone attacks, cluster drone attacks, and so forth. And so I think what this conference is going to do is identify where we might upgrade ballistic missile defense, where we might upgrade our radars and our capability to shoot down cruise missiles. And Alaska is very much a part of this for the whole country.
Tell me a little bit here about the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. What is the purpose of this organization? What do they, what do you guys do? What's the whole point here?
Sure. I've been a member of the Alliance for now 25 years or so. It was founded, and its current director is a guy named Ricky Ellison, who was a linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers, played with Joe Montana, has 3 Super Bowl rings, and he's good at interceptions, and that's kind of the sports analogy there. But actually, he had a mentor named Bill Van Cleve, who was also a mentor of mine. He was on the arms control negotiations, disagreed with the ABM treaty, worked with us I was at the Institute of the North that Governor Hickel founded in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we all worked together with a group of other conservative or free market think tanks to help the nation come to the decision to deploy missile defense. So Ricky is an incredibly active guy who works with missile defenders all over the world. It's been very important in Europe. He's coming from Doha today. It's very important in the Middle East. And he comes here at least once a year to applaud the troops who are working on missile defense, and also to inform those of us who want to be informed on policy issues, what's going on. So that's what the Alliance is all about.
And of course, bolstering our missile defense again. And, you mentioned North Korea, and I just remember all the fervor over when they were doing launches and tests. And I mean, it was reaching all the way towards California and Hawaii. And, I think parts of one of the missiles actually struck U.S. soil at some point after it had self-destructed or been shot down or whatever. So, I mean, there are real threats out there in the world, not just from major actors, but from from state actors who are who are concerning to us. That is definitely one of the biggest concerns. I mean, not only does it make it good for us strategically that Alaska's close to all this, it also makes us a bigger target because we are closer to all this.
Well, I have back before he started shooting up Ukraine, actually 2011, I was in a room at an Arctic conference with Vladimir Putin. And Putin talks about missile defense at Fort Greely all the time. He says, we're not militarizing the argument of the Arctic like the U.S. did with Fort Greely. And he points to that a lot. And he also points to his studies on hypersonic glide vehicles, one of which had an accident recently, if I got that story right, as his way to get around this. So one of the questions that we'll be talking about is the limited missile defense that we've got at Fort Greely is meant to counter a North Korean attack or an accidental launch by the Russians or the Chinese, or a Scud attack by even an unknown player. There's some very good scenarios on how that can happen. But is it time, is a question, for us to have a larger missile defense to be able to actually deter the Russians further? And with Putin mentioning nuclear war again and again, it's just an obvious question to have. As far as the North Koreans are concerned, Barack Obama got elected saying he wanted to dismantle missile defense. He didn't think it was necessary. When the North Koreans started doing that, he activated missile defense at Fort Greely and ultimately ended his administration by calling for an expansion and funding an expansion. So this has gone from being a left versus right issue to basically, we've seen how it works well in Israel. It's the technical arguments that are tough. They are tough because it costs more to defend against a missile than to launch a missile at somebody. But at the same time, warfare is something we want to avoid. And one thing you can do with missile defense is deter.
Yeah. So the Think Big, Go Fast Missile Defense of the Homeland, it's a forum. It's happening tomorrow at the Denina Center in Anchorage, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Anybody can attend, but you just have to RSVP, right? So you send an email to RSVP@missiledefenseadvocacy.org, and you could attend that. And then Saturday, you've got the big awards ceremony at the Marriott downtown. And then Monday, you've got the event on Fort Greely, which is a what event again?
So that's the 20th anniversary of deployment at Fort Greely. In order to get past the base, you do need to RSVP so they can put you on the guest list to get in. So that'll be happening Monday afternoon about 4 o'clock.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I've been kind of following a lot of this stuff over the years, Mead, and, the hypersonic delivery vehicles are one of the things that I'm seriously concerned about. For many, Chinese are working on one, their anti-carrier operations and things like that. I mean, this is some troubling stuff where they continue to try and outdo the technology that we're using to defend ourselves. It is a troubling time that we live in, and it's something that, there's very few things that I really feel are justified in federal spending, but this kind of ballistic shield is something that I think I can get behind for sure.
Well, Michael, thanks for the shot. I'll just tell you that Alaskans, we understood this. We were part of the DEW line in the 50s, in the beginning of the Cold War. We had Nike missile operations here to defend against fleets of Russian bombers. In the 60s, 70s, well into the 80s, or ending approximately in the 80s. When you talk about the hypersonic glide vehicles, that's huge. I would just also say cruise missiles are huge. And
Right.
When we're flying an AWACS, when you see that that airplane with a great big dish on top, that's an AWACS radar. That's a look down radar that is basically used to support air combat missiles. But we may need more of those. We need better satellite radars to track what's happening.
Yeah.
And frankly, part of the defense there is cyber attack too, is messing up their navigation and their communications. So we're going to learn about all these things, and you'll have experts far smarter than I am able to talk on Friday. So you're welcome to come.
All right. Well, thank you, Mead. I appreciate you coming on board and joining us today. Thanks for giving us the information. Again, Missile Defense Advocacy.org is the website. You can find out more there. And, of course, the events on Friday, Saturday, and Monday. Former Lieutenant Governor Mead Treadwell, thank you for coming on board and joining us today. I appreciate it.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
All right, folks, that does it for this segment. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show continues in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We return right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Oh, man, so much stuff. So much stuff to go over today. Yeah, I got to be honest, the hypersonic delivery vehicles that both China and Russia are working on are spooky, man. That kind of stuff is spooky because it's meant to defeat any basically kind of defense screening, ballistic shields, anti-missile technology, even CWIS systems, the Gatling guns, and everything else. It's definitely some spooky stuff. The good news is that I know the Navy is now working on their new laser defense system, and also a railgun system that might be able to take out some of those threats at a distance. But definitely the technology, she is moving forward, baby. She is moving forward. We need to be able to defend against that stuff. And the cruise missiles. Ooh, yeah. That's nasty. That's some nasty stuff right there. All right. Let me see what you guys have been talking about here in the chat room while I was going on with Mead here. I'm sorry. I was just laughing at something that Michael said. Willie says, Monopoly? He said, come check out native healthcare in rural Alaska goes hand in hand with fuel sales, barge services, airlines. Yeah, I mean, you think we have it tough. Those guys, oof. Frank says, we're past hospitals in Fairbanks. We're not talking about hospitals. Now we're talking about the puppy palace care. $33 million. That's got a surgery center in it, right? That's got a full doctor's facility and a surgery center and everything else in it. Man, I'm shaking my head, and the thing is, what really bugs me about this whole deal is that there is no real information out there that is, on the opposing side. Everything that I could find came from the borough or the hospital administration, both of which obviously are in huge favor of these scenarios. And that's a little troubling. I guess I'll just say that for nothing. That's a little troubling for those things. David says the ERs are cash cows for hospitals. That's why one waits and is moved from room to room in the ER. Chris Story just told the story about his dad, his father-in-law, going to the clinic this summer and going to the hospital because his back was hurting. And it was a $14,000 bill just to get apparently a couple of scans and a pain medication prescription. $14,000. I mean, wow. I mean, that's madness. That's absolute madness. All right. $14,000 for a backache. And then Sandy was telling us about the $12,000 for the colon. I mean, I had a colonoscopy back in 2018. It was during the earthquake. I remember that because I'd done all the prep and I was supposed to go in the day of the earthquake. And I was so pissed because it was like the third time I had gone. There'd been some scheduling conflicts or confusion. And so it was the second or third time I'd gone through the prep for the colonoscopy, which, you got to drink the gallon jug and nothing to eat and blah, blah, blah. I was a little grumpy. Let's just put it that way, when the earthquake hit and they shut everything down. So I know that was when it was. But yeah, I think it was $1,500 for the colonoscopy. But when I went, not $14,000. That's madness. I mean, how can anybody afford anything at that point? What's the end game? What is the end game there? The end game, I guess, is control. I guess the end game is control. All right, we got to go. We got to jump to this. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I don't know if I should open the phones or what. I got a couple other things to talk about, but I guess we'll start out over here. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yeah, so we were just talking about all this. What is the end game of I'm sorry, I'm back to the healthcare issue again. It was very interesting. Mead had reached out and asked if he could talk about this because the events were happening so soon, and I squeezed him in there. That's a fascinating topic, by the way, missile defense and all the new emerging technologies. I mean, I would love to do just a whole show on the emerging technologies just because I find it fascinating. I don't know if you guys would care or not, but between the hypersonic missiles, their delivery vehicles are not really missiles, but between hypersonic and the new missile defense, the Navy's new 1 gigawatt laser system. I don't know if you've seen that. That's pretty cool stuff. Their railgun system that they're working on. Anyway, it's fascinating. We could do a whole show on that all by itself. But anyway, Mead had asked to come on board and talk about it, so we squeezed him in there. But I'm back now to the healthcare thing because I'm in agreement with Dr. Raymond. What is the end game? They couldn't really articulate. Paul Smith or Ryan Smith and couldn't really articulate the end game. And I can only suppose what the end game is. And I think at some point it's about control, right? And I don't know exactly if it's just control for the sake of control or what. But when you have a hospital system that's paying doctors, I mean, I'm assuming essentially, talking about the plastic surgeon who was coming down to the Southern Peninsula area, the Homer area, and was going to move there. And the hospital went ahead and just hired him and started paying him an exorbitant salary because they were afraid that he was going to create a surgery center. And they just couldn't have that. Why? I mean, isn't it about offering the best for the people that are down there? Isn't this about the public good? I mean, that's what the certificate of need is supposed to be. The need is for the public good. And so if you've got a surgeon who's coming down there, who's a plastic surgeon, it's elective surgery. It's not something that's mandated or emergency critical care. It's not, so are they paying this doctor just to sit on his hands? I mean, is that the answer here? I think it was David that said it earlier. If you want a monopoly and you have the financial means, you buy out the competition. Well, that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing doctors get plucked up from other practices and everything else and being offered exorbitant sums of money to shutter their clinics and fold themselves into the hospital. which is good for them. I mean, I'm never against, people getting a return on their investment and making money back. But at the same time, where does that leave the community? The story of Chris Story, where you get an x-ray and then the doctor sells his machine or his imaging systems to the hospital, and the very next day, the cost of those same scans doubles in price. Is that good for the community? Because, well, we've got centralized control now and the government's in charge. And, that's like it's like the scariest phrase in the government's in charge. Oh, that's a good thing. I've got one word for you when you say the government's in charge and that's a good thing. The United States Postal Service. Okay, I've got two phrases. The DMV, right? Are you telling me that the same organizations that have a hard time getting some efficiencies baked into those systems are going to do great with your health care? Again, nothing against the people that work there. I'm just saying the system is baked in with inefficiencies, and it's just the nature of bureaucracy and government. And so now we've got the government pushing to get more of your tax dollars, take properties off the rolls, put them in charge of deferred maintenance, which apparently they have a real hard time getting a handle on, and you're expecting it's all going to work out in the end? I mean, look, if I lived down on the peninsula, I lived in the Homer area, and I needed something done that wasn't like, hey, I'm bleeding out right now, I need to go to the hospital, but was just something that, why would I ever go to the local hospital if it was going to cost me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times what it would cost me to go to Kenai or even to Anchorage? Right? I mean, that's madness. Just for the convenience of avoiding a 1 hour trip, a 3 hour trip, or whatever. I mean, a plane ride. Why would I ever do that? It makes no sense whatsoever. And yet here they are squashing competition and doing. These are supposed to be community hospitals, communities owned by the community, not with some vision of the future where they become the only hospital system there. Because again, that's what happens when you have a monopoly. I mean, monopolies are bad, right? We hear that from the government all the time. Monopolies are bad, unless, of course, it's a government monopoly, and then it's good. How is it good? I mean, when you look at the cost of healthcare in Alaska, and you can go community by community, place by place, and you see that, the further you get away from Anchorage, the more the costs increase, double, triple, quadruple. And then you do a comparative between even Anchorage and Seattle. Why? How is that benefiting the community? How is that benefiting the community? Again, these are supposed to be community hospitals. And they've already admitted they're making a profit, $150 million on 2.5% of, what, I mean, they're already making $3-4 million a year in profit, although they're not trying. They're not trying. It's not a nonprofit. It's a not-for-profit. Okay. But they're not trying. Look, we made a profit. If that's the case, then why aren't they utilizing those funds and pouring those back into the community instead of coming back to the citizens hat in hand saying, we need more of your money to make this work? I mean, it's not going to reduce your costs or anything, but it'll give us more, stuff to do, things to. And the problem is, as I said earlier, the problem with this whole thing is that it will probably pass. I spent a good part of this morning and some of yesterday afternoon and a good part of this morning trying to find information on this hospital bond issue. I found informational flyers at the Southern Peninsula Hospital. There was informational flyers at the borough website. There was a ProPublica article back from June on some of the other stuff. And then the only really other two things was that there was an article from KBBI and there was an article from Alaska Public Media and the Homer News. And it was all back in June. Over the course of a week, there was 3 different articles about this. And it offered very limited information, basically told you what the bond was supposed to cover, what some of their justifications were. There was no opposing statement. There's no balancing. I mean, this is what kills me. Even if it's something that I support, I appreciate it when somebody opposes it so that there can be a discussion on it. There should be an opposing viewpoint. This is just like I said, when every elected official should have a challenger, whether they're my person or not. They should have a challenger because that keeps them sharp and it keeps the argument out there and it keeps, it makes them justify their position. But I could find nothing about this until Chris had this discussion with Dr. Raymond and Ryan Smith from the Peninsula Hospital, the CEO there. That is a fascinating piece, and you should go back and you should listen to it. That discussion was eye-opening because in that, Ryan Smith admits some things that I don't know if he thought he really admitted, but it will be eye-opening to what's going on with the healthcare system down there in the peninsula. Now, you folks up in the interior, we fought some of these battles, and we've had some successes, right? Certificate of Need. Dr. Wade got the surgery center going up there. Was able to do a few things. We were able to overcome some of those things, and because of it, we have reduced the cost of healthcare in some of those areas. It seems like the Homer area is going in exactly the opposite direction. When they have millions of dollars to throw around, and they can literally hire people away from private practices for $100,000 more than they're currently making to go work on staff, that money has to come from somewhere. I mean, and I don't know how much Dr. Raymond was paying the doctors in question. He said he had several of his doctors working at his practice that were hired away. But I imagine that his people were making $100,000 a year, wouldn't you? But if they're offering them $100,000 more than Dr. Raymond was paying them, that money has to come from somewhere. And you know where it comes from? It comes from the inflated costs of the healthcare that you're getting at the hospitals. I mean, it's people have got to get it. But again, the fact of the matter is this will probably pass, because if you ask people on the street, should we pay more to make sure that our hospital system works? Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, this is almost like for the children, right? Or should we do it for the children? Yes, we should always do it for the children. No idea of the underlying components, no idea of the underlying costs. It sounds like a good idea, so let's do it. I mean, it's the same kind of thing that we're seeing on this $15 an hour minimum wage ballot. It's, this is a challenge. This is a challenge. And no, Mayor Machicki, he's quoted in this article from Alaska Public. He said, that brings the cost down to those who are receiving those services, and the entire system benefits because of that. But even Ryan Smith admitted that this is not going to bring the cost of healthcare down. There's no effect of making healthcare cheaper. But hey, never let something like that go to waste, right? Never let something like that go to waste. All right, we got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. One more segment dead ahead. We'll return. I got something I could talk about, or we'll take some suggestions from the chat room. We'll be back with more right after this.
our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
Okay, let's go back to where we are. Jeannie says, back in the days when the hospitals were owned by communities, the care was incredibly inexpensive. Well, I mean, yes, but see, they're still owned by the communities, right? I mean, the Kenai Peninsula Borough still owns the hospital system. They have a not-for-profit running it, but at that point, it was supposed to be, how can we make the number one goal was quality care at the most affordable price. Now it seems to be, how much can we accumulate? How much power, how much can we take out of the community? It's insane. Brian says, I think there's a bit of the support the home team mentality. Saw that with my parents. They thought it was a bit tacky to shop costs. Also, people buy insurance with the expectation the insurance companies will do battle. Insurance companies are in league with these folks, man. They're all making money on this deal. They don't care. They got your money. They're going to spend as little as they can to pay for it and leave you with whatever's remaining on the bill. I mean, this is Dr. Raymond saying, the copay on the scan that his wife got was twice what the cost of the actual procedure would have been in Anchorage. The copay. Michael says, low information voters being duped by misleading voter language manipulation. Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah. Sandy says, I think all the folks who with insurance will vote yes. They think it won't affect them. But again, as I was just saying, Dr. Raymond, Blue Cross, gold-plated insurance, the deductibles twice what they think it won't affect them, but it will. Yeah. Terry said, I called out the hospitals for IVs that they billed me for. I never got any IVs. Always get an itemized bill. There will be things you never received. Lowered my bill by over $3,000. That was a piece of advice I got many years ago that said, when you get a hospital bill, you demand a detailed itemized bill for everything. And then you go through it. My daughter did that actually because they hit her with an emergency room bill here a while ago. And I said, that seems unreasonable. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, ask them for a detailed bill. And they immediately forgave about half of what the debt was right off the bat. They knew they'd gotten stuck with something. Soldatna says, Sandy doesn't have challenger doctors. I don't know what that means other than I guess I would say outside the hospital system. You pay to see a doc, you go to the hospital, you have to see their doctor, no exceptions. Yeah. Well, I know there are some independent doctors out there. I don't know about specialists, but I know GPs, general practitioners are out there for sure. Take a look at what the CEO of South Peninsula Hospital makes a year. How much is it, Bill? Don't leave me hanging because I am curious. I was thinking about that earlier today and I just haven't gone and looked at their financials. So what does the CEO of Southern Peninsula Hospital make in a year? Do you know? I want to know. Open the phone, says Jeannie. All right, I'll open the phones. You talked me into it. I mean, I really was. You talked me into it. I'll open the phones because Jeannie said to open the phones. Maybe somebody will call in. Maybe they won't. We'll see where it goes. I got another topic that I can touch on that just burns my cookies. Not that I need to have my cookies burned any more than they already are, but we'll see this. Come on. Load. There we go. Load the phones. Let me get to some other comments while I'm waiting for the phones to start here. Go into healthcare if you're a people person. Bill said he believes it's $2.5 million. The CEO is making $2.5 million. God almighty. That can't be. That seems.
Thanks for calling.
That seems excessive. That seems excessive even for something like, I mean, I would have believed $400,000 or $500,000, but oof. That's madness. All right, let me, I got the phones up and running now. And so the phone lines are open. If you want to sound off, 513, it's 319-527-3864. 319-527-3864. If you want to tell me your horror story about the hospital, then I guess I could take those horror stories. Otherwise, I've got another story to talk about. So I have opened up the phone lines. If you want to call in, feel free to do so. All right, let's get to it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's go. Right now. No. I'm 5 seconds off. How was I 5 seconds off? That's insane. All right, here we go. Let's do it. All right, welcome back to the program. One final segment of the show, and they talked me into opening up the phone line. So I guess we'll open up the phone lines and see what you guys have to say. I mean, I got other things we could talk about as well, but I mean, I'm curious. What has your experience been with your local hospitals, especially if you're down on the peninsula? And what are your thoughts on this bond issue? Jeannie is calling in from down on the peninsula. Let's see what Jeannie has to say this morning. Good morning, Jeannie. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Michael. After the doctor talked, I was like, is nobody drawing parallels? Am I the only one that's seeing what's going on with the money in the borough? They're making money hand over fist, but yet they want a $52 million bond. I realize it starts out at $33 million or whatever, but by the time the bond matures, it's 52. You said that yesterday or day before yesterday, I don't remember.
Right.
What's going on? Why are we subsidizing people to make money?
Right. Well, I mean, again, you know, community hospitals were supposed to be community hospitals where they commit quality care at the lowest cost possible, right? That was the whole point of having community, because the most expensive part of a lot of that stuff is the infrastructure and the equipment and things like that. It's gone beyond that now to where community clinics and community hospitals used to provide, you know, relatively affordable care, to where now, I mean, why would they pay the salary of a plastic surgeon who's coming to town simply because they're afraid he would start a surgery center? I mean, again, it makes no sense. It's like they're trying to squash the competition of all things, and that just means that they can then set their price. They can do whatever they want. Is that really what we want in a community hospital? Is that really what we want in community healthcare?
No, it's not. And not only that, you know, I thought it was like illegal to have monopolies.
Well, it's illegal to have monopolies unless you're a government, right? I mean, this is the problem with the Certificate of Need program from back in the day, and I'd done shows on this over the years, but Certificate of Need came out of a very specific instance of you know, people basically saying we need to make sure that the government gives the rubber stamp of approval to anybody who's going to provide healthcare in a given area, because we don't want you to have too much. It was a flawed premise to begin with, and it's been, especially in Alaska with our rural, very rural needs and communities, you know, a few number of communities, it's an outdated and outmoded component. We don't need it anymore. If there was more competition, then yeah. Then we would see a dramatic reduction in our healthcare costs. I mean, we saw it in Fairbanks. When the new surgery center opened in Fairbanks, the prices there dropped, both for people who went to the surgery center and for people who went to the hospital, because the hospital ultimately had to drop their rates because there was competition. Same thing with imaging and diagnostic and imaging, MRIs, X-rays. As soon as these new imaging centers started opening up around the around the state, we saw the cost of imaging plummet. And there's a reason for that, because competition is good.
So Providence recently took over, I don't know whether it was just the medical records or whatever, but when I pay my hospital payment, I make it to CPH, but yet everything in my medical records is all through Providence. So tell me what Providence relationship is with CPH, and is it the same down in Homer for SPH?
You know, that's a good question.
Is Providence medical system now?
I have no idea. Is Providence got a healthcare record system that they're doing, or, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question.
It's Epic, which is all of the Pacific coast from Southern California to the top of Alaska is Epic. And that's what runs, and that's what Providence runs.
Right.
But why are my bills and all my stuff coming to Providence?
That's a good question.
How does Providence fit into this?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Jeannie, and I don't have an answer for it. Maybe somebody else does. But anyway, I appreciate you calling in and sounding off this morning. Thanks for being part of it.
Thanks, Michael.
Let's go over here to Bubba, who's in North Pole. Bubba, what's on your mind? Go ahead, Bubba. Apparently he did not hold. Let's go over here to Bill. Bill, what's happening with you, my friend?
Well, here a while back, I don't even remember exactly the context, but you mentioned deferred maintenance, and that's exactly what I've got on my mind.
Okay.
I'm talking about the condition of the Parks Highway in certain places where it's crumbling. Okay. For example, there are places where the highway surface is so undermined that it's like just a mosaic of chunks of asphalt that are all sunken down and, you know, ready to blow up into the next pothole.
Right.
And the potholes have been repaired. A lot of them are just right in front of the other, you know, like 4 in a row, you know, type of stuff. And these have resulted in a large part because maintenance has been deferred. There are both the transverse cracks that, you know, go from side to side of the highway, and there are also cracks that are kind of linear in parallel with the general direction of the highway.
Right.
And these have been left unrepaired, you know, unaddressed, whatever you want to call it. They could have probably been very easily cured by dropping some sealant into those. But that work hasn't been done because, you know, evidently the people that are maintaining the highways don't like to do work that has to be done, you know, off the seat of a tractor, you might say.
Well, I don't know, Bill. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's the fact that the workers don't want to do the work, or somebody's not putting the monies forward in the right area. I think that's more of and that's a DOT question. Have you talked to Northern DOT about it, or Southern DOT?
They hate me so much they won't even talk to me. But here's the deal: is, you know, you're exactly on mark there. A lot of money has gone into doing what I call intersection remodels. This is where they chop back maybe the curbing and a little bit of the sidewalk or something like that, and they are putting in these extra huge lamp standards,
right,
which I bet is all money that's being funneled to China, because of course this is all being paid for by federal bucks out of the so-called infrastructure bills that they're federal government spending that is getting our national debt up, $1 trillion every 100 days.
Okay, Bill, I think you're going far afield here. I don't want to try national debt to local road maintenance. I think that, yes, you're right. I would agree that we need to look at that. But I've got to go. Thank you, Bill. Dave is the last caller for today. Dave, what's on your mind?
Morning, Michael. Dave, down in Homer.
Morning, Dave.
So, I've got to go out of state for a lot of medical procedures, and I've taken all my imaging and everything else up to Central, just for the simple reason that when a surgeon wants images after surgery, it takes forever and a day for the Homer Hospital to do anything about it. This last time he ordered the CAT scan, they got approval for an MRI, which wasn't his order, and so we ended up having to turn that approval down from the insurance because he wanted the CAT scan. Now, it took 3 months to get the approval for the MRI.
Wow.
So I took it up to Central, and within 4 days, they got the approval for the CAT scan and had the disc mailed to my surgeon that next day, which Homer couldn't do it.
Right. So they're not even doing a good job. What you're saying is, Dave, they're not even doing a good job with what they have right now. How should we give them more, right? Is that bottom line?
It's bottom line.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah. All right, Dave. Well, thank you so much for your call. I appreciate you calling in. Sorry, I'm up against top of the hour break. Tomorrow, my friends, is Firearms Friday, and we are going to be enjoying ourselves then. In the meanwhile, tell your friends about today's show. Tell your friends about what's going on with this vote. And while it may sound good, may not be the best thing for you. Let them make their decision, but oof. All right, be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. God love Bill, but I mean, cracks in the potholes are part of the national debt. Yeah. All right. Yes, we need to get tomorrow's Firearms Friday. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, folks, for participating today. As always, it's good to talk with you. Good to see you here in the chat room. We will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Welcome.